Kishore Gopalakrishna is one of the prime movers in the real-time analytics space. He's the co-founder and CEO of StarTree and one of the co-creators of Apache Pinot. So he's really been there from the beginnings of real-time analytics as a coherent movement. I talked to him today about what it was like at LinkedIn. What were the factors that led him to think, hey, we should make a new database? That's a big thing. And it's a really interesting story, how that unfolded, what happened in those early days, what were the pressures, and really the impacts of the creation of Pinot. So let's listen in as Kishore and I talk about this pivotal part of history. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Real-Time Analytics Podcast. I am your host, Tim Berglund with StarTree. I'm joined in the studio today by Kishore Gopalakrishna. Kishore, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for having me here.
Of course. Kishore is the co-founder and CEO of StarTree, co-creator of Apache Pinot, also happens to be my boss. And I wanted to talk to you today about the origins of Pinot. Now, I know this has come up before, but you've told this story before. But sometimes on the podcast, I ask questions because even though I know the answer and I'm just trying to kind of lead the conversation along and help the audience learn things and clarify things, sometimes I ask questions because I don't know the answer. And I only kind of know the story. Like I know the broad outline of the story, but I've never actually listened to you tell the whole thing. So some of this is just for my curiosity and everybody gets to benefit. So I think a lot of people know Pinot began at LinkedIn. You spent some time at LinkedIn. You can give any context you want around that. I want to start us off with what were you doing at LinkedIn and what happened to cause you to realize that you needed to build a new database? That's it seems like something big has to happen for you to want to do that. So what were you doing and how did you get to that decision?
Yeah, that's a great thing. I think probably we can start a little bit early before that in terms of what I was doing at Espresso.
Yes, Espresso. What's Espresso?
Yeah. So that was where I really wanted to build a database. I think, in fact, for Pinot, I really didn't want to build a new one. So we had a initial version of Pinot at LinkedIn. It was built on search technology like Lucene. So we had an internal version of, we call it Bobo and Sensei. So that was used to power search for LinkedIn.
Gotcha. Nodes were based on Lucene. So yes. It was like an internal Elasticsearch.
Exactly. Yeah, you can think of it as internal Elasticsearch at LinkedIn. And that was the first one. And we actually served Who Viewed My Profile on top of that.
Okay. And Who Viewed My Profile, probably most people remember that coming to be. But in case they don't, what was the business doing there? Why did that come to exist?
That's actually an amazing question because that was something that came from the product team to build a product like that. Because if you go back 2011, 2012, you would probably just go to LinkedIn to change your resume, right? I mean, you were not doing what you're doing today, where you're probably posting all your amazing videos and at the same time visiting it probably every 5 minutes or every 1 hour. That was not the case then. So engagement was really a big challenge for LinkedIn, and they wanted to improve the engagement. So that's what then they realized that, hey, can we provide some rich analytical products and insights back to our end users, right? And so that people come back to LinkedIn, improve the engagements. And Who Viewed My Profile was just an experiment at that point, right? Hey, how can we bring people back? Can we provide them more insights in who is looking at their profile? Are they recruiters? Are they which company, which skill set, which geo? And one of the second order effects, the nice benefit of that was people would go there and like, oh, this person looked at my profile. I know him. I worked with him at this company. I know him from this call. Let me connect. So it was kind of an thing that happened organically. And then a lot of connections started originating from that page.
Yeah. A brilliant product innovation there. Just that idea. It went from being your CV and your Rolodex to suddenly this thing is alive, and just the number of second order effects that spring from that. So
yes, it's just.
I mean, the book has been written. There needs to be a docudrama on that.
Yes, I wish LinkedIn at some point produces like all the numbers behind what happens. But it's amazing to see the improvement in the engagement metrics, improvement in the connections, improvement, even people joining LinkedIn. So there are a lot of things that actually improved because of this product. So it was a huge success. I don't think anyone thought that it would be a big success. That's why we just used whatever tool was available at LinkedIn, which was the Elasticsearch equivalent
thing. Yeah,
and then say like, let's launch it, right? And it was a very simple thing. And there was another turning point there, which was we started providing a lot more insights, not just saying, oh, here are all the people that viewed your profile, but more slicing and dicing. Because that's something that most people don't realize, that if you just show a line chart, it's not that interesting. And the QPS was not that great at that time. Like, like only 10 or 20 people would look at this.
And I'm realizing who viewed my profile isn't a bad search query pattern, right? That's not malfitted to search. But what you're saying now, all of a sudden, you really are doing analytics. You're doing grouping and
exactly. So now you're doing slicing and dicing, roll up, drill down. So all those things start happening. And that's when it's not about just putting load on Lucene, but it's like everybody wanted to use this. And that's where the queries went from like tens of queries to like thousands of queries per second. Like any given second, there were 1,000 people looking at this page. Wow. Right. So that was a massive success for the product team, for the Pinot team, for everyone. Right. But there was a huge problem behind the scene. And I remember when I started in this team, this was when they had the previous version of Lucene. We had 1,000 nodes, and there was no infrastructure to actually even manage these 1,000 nodes. So we would shard those nodes, and we would say like, okay, this set of members who have a lot of hits for their who viewed my profile page will be in this shard. And then so we would actually manually have to shard them. So that's the only way we could scale. We couldn't run a cluster with 1,000 nodes. So we had 10 clusters of 100 nodes.
Oh, sharded. Okay. So I've heard the 1,000 number. I didn't know that there was also sharding in the mix.
Yes.
Okay. And so it was worse than I thought.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. And I still remember the days when Shang and other folks in the team were actually manually rebalancing this and then making sure all these clusters are up and running all the time. That's when we realized that there is something wrong with the technology that we are using. And this was really made for a low concurrency and even the latency. If you look at it, one thing that we realized is the expectation for an user-facing analytics is very different from internal. You can probably get by with seconds latency when it is internal, but when you have external, you want like something in milliseconds. So we actually had people who would just click on who viewed my profile, and if it is taking a lot of time to load, they would just move on.
Okay.
So this is a very important thing that most people don't realize is you need to have a very low latency for user-facing analytics. Otherwise, people just move on from one page to another.
And that concept of user-facing analytics, was that new to you at the time? Like this is a realization you are making?
Or this is now. At that time, we didn't even know what we were doing, very honestly. So we just like, hey, this is
feature, you're trying to build it.
And this is a product. We just want to get the engagement up. We never knew this would actually turn into a category, and we would actually be doing hundreds and hundreds of products like that.
And by the way, a good way to gather that history is just to say on a podcast, no one had ever thought of the category of user-facing analytics prior to this.
No.
If someone has, now they'll be able to comment or say, we'll find out if there's sort of prior art there. But it's not any kind of widespread concept, and it's probably a novel concept at this point.
Yes.
Certainly to the team at LinkedIn, which is no small thing.
Yeah. No, I think there were a few terminologies like that. I think the people used to call, internally we used to refer as site-facing. Because we used to use site. Yeah. So it's like a website. So it was like site facing, which is, and the other one that people used to call was also embedded analytics, right? So this was very similar to that concept. The only difference is in embedded analytics, they would always take this BI tools like Tableau or Power BI and then try to embed that in an iframe onto the website.
Not simply embedded in the product, but literally iframe
that. And that was how embedded analytics was done, right? And it was a very popular term, but it was done horribly, right? And again, they didn't have the slicing and dicing. It was clunky, that wouldn't refresh very fast. And I think the idea was good that you want to provide analytics to your end users.
Yes.
But the way it was done was really bad.
People are struggling with the best tools that they have,
Yeah.
But not working. And I think you said the way it was done was terrible. Embedded analytics, embedded in an iframe, that's definitionally terrible. But also that whole suite of tools that you have to do your analysis, that category of databases that will do that, none of them are designed to be serving things in a website that on a page load.
Yes, the entire stack has to be reimagined, right? It's not just on the back end, but even on the front end, right? I mean, if you're just putting an iframe and like an BI tool, you are now expecting the users to understand how to use a BI tool, right? And
terrible idea.
It's when you go to Who Viewed My Profile, no one knows that they're actually running SQL queries behind the scene. It's just an app for them.
Yeah, you don't want to know that.
Yeah, so I think that's the another thing that LinkedIn really figured out was, this is the way to provide insights to end users. This is the way they would like to consume. It's as simple as like I just click, I just move around, but behind the scenes, something is actually making all these queries.
Yes. So key points being they are application features. Yes. Users are not aware of there being a database unless it's the sort of user who likes to think about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're application features, making a dramatic business impact as a piece of the product, game changer for LinkedIn. And at the same time, historically, Facebook is kind of unfolding, and Twitter, and this idea of a news feed was, completely native to LinkedIn now, was foreign to LinkedIn then. Yes. But these things are now kind of going to start to come along for the ride. So you're seeing huge business impact. You're seeing these existing tools aren't suited to the job. You had kind of this clustered search thing lying around that you picked up and adapted, and it was good at first, and then it wasn't. So I want to come back to that. You started to hint at, I think so many people were engineering managers. So 15 of the people who viewed your profile today were engineering managers and things like that. Now, that's an analytic query. That's slicing and dicing and aggregating to get you there. So where did that tension develop, and how did that push you into the first steps to, I need to build Pinot? Like what happened?
So I think that's where, in fact, I tell this in other places as well. When I saw that it needed 1,000 nodes, and then we had like real nightmares in terms of managing that
Seems like
cluster.
A lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And I was actually saying like, hey, let's just kill this product. Let's just go to batch. And and then let's keep it simple. Like who really needs this tool, right?
And fair enough. Who viewed my profile yesterday?
Yeah.
Or this morning or something? I mean, I guess that's still interesting.
Yeah, still interesting. And then we go back to the batch, don't provide all these slicing and dicing. It's like, why do you need it? But again,
it's funny. That's not the Kishore I know. The Kishore I know wouldn't say, let's kill this product.
Yeah, I know. I think it's good to change sometimes. So.
Absolutely. In some ways, I'm glad.
You learn from your mistakes. But I think it was really kudos to the product team that saw the power of this and building something like this. They could see like, hey, if we had a technology that could do this efficiently and be able to provide the latency that we need, this could be game changing for LinkedIn.
Yeah, if I'm the PM who came up with that idea or who's in some way responsible for it, I am currently very eager to fund whatever you tell me we need to do to make it work better.
Yeah. And also interesting thing was Jeff Weiner, who was the CEO of LinkedIn, he would get the maximum number of views on his profile. And the interesting thing also about this was when you get maximum number of profile views, your page of Who Viewed My Profile would be the slowest. So it's kind of works. Okay. And he was like, I want this page to be loaded faster. So we had someone, the CEO, really wanting this page to be fast.
So you're not gonna get out of this product at this point.
Yeah. So I think that's when we went back to the drawing board. I think the good thing was, since we ran it on an existing system, which is based on search, we understood like what are all the bottlenecks, why this was not done the right way, right? And that's when we went back to the first principles and said like, if we were to do this again, what are all the things that we would do to address this, address the challenges? Yeah. So looked at every layer in the stack, right? We didn't want to just build a new system for the sake of building. So we looked at the storage layer, we looked at the indexing layer, we looked at the query processing layer. So we had to make a lot of different changes fundamentally to a system, because from an outside, I think that's one thing that people see. Like, it's an OLAP database. You just run a query and you get a result.
One is tempted to say, how much innovation can there be here? This isn't a new idea.
Yeah, exactly.
How is this magic?
Yeah. So I think that's where we went and looked at each and every layer and then we came up with like a new way of actually doing this. And we looked at existing databases. And one of the key insights for us there was one in terms of the storage. Most databases don't try to localize the access patterns, right? So because every seek that you do on a disk has a latency associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing for us was like, hey, when a query comes, can we minimize the amount of hops that we do on the disk? So we started off at that low level in terms of optimizing the performance.
How can I make reads and writes sequential?
Yes, exactly, right. And then so that's where
which even matters in the world of SSDs. I mean, it might matter.
Yes, it matters. It matters
relatively less, but it still matters.
It still matters a lot. Yes, and that's first thing that we saw, that search didn't really have that concept of a sorted index. So they always had an inverted index, but they didn't have a concept of sorted, right? And that was the first pattern that we saw, that hey, this, when you're looking at your own Who Viewed My Profile, you're just accessing your own data. You're not really looking at someone else's data, right? So that basically meant that if we can, as the data is coming in, if we can constantly keep reorganizing the data as they come in to make sure that your data is all together, I can just serve your query with just one or two seeks. Mm-hmm. Instead of, I have to seek like 100 different places, because you will be getting views all over the place, right? You will, from in terms of a time span.
Right. But all associated with you. So
yes. So if you can group them, put them together, and again, this has to happen automatically. You can't ask the users to go and keep doing this behind.
It's a bad idea to ask users to think about IOPS in their database.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're doing it with a small number of them, not a large number.
Yes. So that's kind of how we build the sorted index, right? So we went from the storage layer to like, hey, what are the new indexes that we need to build to serve this, to make this really, really efficient. So in a way, we wanted to get the latency per query as low as possible. In fact, right now, average latency is like 5 milliseconds for Who Viewed My Profile.
Okay.
Yeah, any query takes like 5 milliseconds, and we have a 95th percentile latency, which is like less than 100 milliseconds. So if it takes more than 100 milliseconds, you get a page. That's the level of SLA that we actually maintain for that product.
All right. And a P50, an average of single digits.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So it really was that Who Viewed My Profile.
Yeah.
You went to build it. You picked up an existing tool that was kind of sitting on the workbench and used it, saw the tension with that. And then it seems like product saw initial success, started to innovate, and pushed you. Your operational costs on using that search tool were not great.
Yeah.
And that was a pain. But then they started to push you in the direction of this just isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And the story of Pinot sounds like one of careful bottom-up engineering against this new requirement of low query latency.
Yes.
Yeah.
And high concurrency.
And of course, high concurrency. And fresh data.
Fresh data. Yeah, I think those are the three things. Yeah.
Those always reemerge. And I guess what gets me is, in previous generations, I mean, everyone has always wanted performance. It's not like anyone ever optimized for slow queries, but no one sat down from the ground up to be able to answer this, I'll call it really web native or UI native kind of thing. And that's really the story of Pinot's origins.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating to see these databases when one parameter changes. Like, I think in this case, it's latency. You can always achieve latency, low latency, but the two parameters that got added was freshness. That means you're no longer loading data in batch. As soon as data comes in, you're actually serving that. And the second one was concurrency. So when you add dimensions like this, the whole game changes. The system that you had just completely falls apart.
Yeah.
That's where you really need to rethink, reimagine, and then build a system that actually handles this. Tomorrow we might get another dimension that completely changes the game, and we might need a new system. But so far, I think these 3 dimensions are like
those are the things that
matter a lot.
Driving real-time user-facing analytics. Slightly different question. LinkedIn and open source. Now, I've got some experience in the Kafka community, also created at LinkedIn, open sourced, Apache Software Foundation, wildly successful. Now, Pinot, open sourced, Apache Software Foundation, beginning its journey of wild success. What's the, to the extent that, you were an engineering leader there, not an executive there, I don't,
no.
But to the extent that you experienced it, how did LinkedIn think about open source, and why is it this kind of magical farm team for projects like this that are so impactful?
That's actually a great question, because I was at Yahoo before LinkedIn, and one of the things that really attracted me towards LinkedIn was the open source.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember one of the conferences I was, they had recently open sourced Voldemort, right? If you remember that product.
I remember the gym I worked out at the time when I was listening to the software engineering radio episode where this guy named Jay Krebs was talking about this Dynamo clone he wrote called Project Voldemort.
Yeah.
He went on to create a moderately more successful open source project sometime later, but I remember Voldemort. So why did they do this?
I think I didn't really know when I was joining them why they're doing it, but it
knew that they did.
I just knew it, but it also, if you kind of look at it, that got me into LinkedIn.
Okay.
So there is
one thing.
There's one thing, and I think LinkedIn was very smart to realize, again, the second order effect of open sourcing. It's you attract the best engineers out there.
Strategic recruiting and retention advantage.
So it was actually, and then it was not just that they did it for recruiting, they really believed in it. And even though I was not an exec, they actually had an open source community internally, and I was actually part of that. So in fact, the mandate, or kind of the recommendation within the open source group was like, if you have a project, is like, why are you not open sourcing it? Instead of why are you open sourcing it? Right. So that's the mindset that we had, which is, hey, we will help you. We will tell you what are the things that you need to do when you open source something. Make sure your documentation is good. Make sure you write a blog. Make sure you post something, and write the tutorials, write the recipes, all those things. So we actually had a committee to help every project be successful. Right. Obviously, some of them became super successful, some of them, but it required a lot more effort. And I think another thing that we also found was, I think I love this analogy. I think it was Igor who came up with this, is it's just like your house, right? When guests come in, how is your house versus when you don't have any guests?
Different.
So you end up cleaning it up, and you're cleaning a lot more, right? I think that's what happens with the projects as well. We could see that when someone open sourced a project, they would actually, the owners of the project would actually go and clean up the code, clean up the documentation, because they are now proud of the work that they're doing.
The psychology is fascinating.
It's amazing to see. And this was not just like an idea, but I see it happen.
Yeah.
And I would do it myself as well. Right? Like everyone does this. So I think in a way, it is actually win-win in a lot of different dimensions.
Because your coworkers, the internal only code. We had the dog food versus champagne conversation. Do you drink your own champagne or do you eat your own dog food? And developers tend to say dog food because you know what your code looks like, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's kind of used to that. All the internal stuff. Oh yeah, it's trash. And it might be great, but we know where all the bodies are buried and what's bad and what's hard. And we tend to think it's all trash. And we have this kind of shared, private, either shared sense of shame about it, or it's just, it's okay for the house to be messy when it's just us. But then when it's open for the world to see,
exactly.
Put some pants on, suddenly this is this is a big deal. And so that's great. Okay.
Yeah. So I think
I thought of that.
it was amazing. I think they really saw this, the benefits of open source, and it definitely helped in hiring, attracting the best people. And I think you can see that in the last decade, like the number of projects that came out of LinkedIn, right?
And we're almost at time, but speculating, because I've always had a theory that when it's becomes something important, like Kafka, like Pinot, that are, you can't use LinkedIn.com, the website, without using those in pivotal, strategic, fundamental ways. Open sourcing them, when they get uptake from the outside world, you actually see the network effect of, well, now there are other people. Uber has adopted Pinot, and Uber is contributing things. And so you really do get I'm careful with this because to some degree, I think this is a mythology of open source that doesn't always hold true. But I wonder if you saw benefit from, once those became more broadly adopted, there was external investment that then LinkedIn benefited from. Did that happen, or did you ever see that happening? Or
I think there's huge benefits in open sourcing.
Yeah.
I think where I see people get this wrong is they think the investment from outside always has to come as contributions to the code.
Okay.
But that's not necessarily true, right? I think you can almost think of, you don't need a product manager if you have users. They tell you exactly what the product should be doing. So to me, I love the community, and in terms of how much they have helped shape Pinot, because they just tell, hey, this is what the project should be doing, and they help you push the boundaries. So that's what happened with Uber and Stripe and other companies adopting Pinot. It's not, yes, they definitely contributed a lot, but it's even beyond that. They say like, hey, these are the ways you can actually improve the project. These are the new set of features. So it helps you get that input from users, and they're just doing it out of just pure love for the project, right? So you're not asking them, you're not doing a customer study or a user study, or like going them and like, hey, tell me what you want from they're actually coming to you and telling like, hey, we love what it's doing, but we want it to do this other thing. And again, as an owner of the project, it's your responsibility to make sure you take those inputs and do the right thing. But at the same time, I feel that is actually a lot more valuable, and probably even 100x more valuable than just the code changes that they actually end up making. So that's something that is not easy to measure. But I look at, I'm always on the Slack channel, as you probably know, on Pinot. That's what I love about it, because they're saying, hey, here is how I'm using it. Here is what I would like to see, and here is what I like, I don't like. So it's amazing to get that input. So to me, I think that's the best part of open sourcing and community, more than the contribution.
My guest today has been Kishore Gopalakrishna. Kishore, thanks for being a part of the Real-Time Analytics podcast.
Thank you, Tim. It was a pleasure being here.
And there you have it. The Real-Time Analytics Summit is coming up on April 25th and 26th, 2023 in downtown San Francisco. You can register at rtasummit.com, and if you use the promo code PODCAST30, that's PODCAST30, you get 30% off your registration. I really hope to see you there. And hey, if you feel compelled to help us spread the word more and grow the real-time analytics community, you can give this podcast a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever fine podcasts are sold. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel and, of course, hit that notification bell. And hey, you can always share your favorite episodes on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever it is you do social media. I look forward to talking to you again in the next episode.